We are pool-plaza.com, and today we're here to show you how to take apart and repair a Hayward Super II pump. To do any repairs on this pump, you'll need just a few basic tools that you may have around the house. You'll need a couple of wrenches, 9/16 inch and 1/2 inch, or socket sets 9/16 or 1/2 inch. You'll need a shaft wrench if you have access to one, a regular wrench, and a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver. When working on a pump, whether it's been installed or whether you're installing a new one, the first step is to make sure that the electricity has been completely turned off or even disconnected from the pump. Make sure that you turn off the breakers, and if you're working on the pump or the motor, make sure that you remove the wiring from the motor so that there's no possibility of electrical shock. To access the wiring on this motor, you need to remove the whole cover on the back. There are 2 screws that must be loosened. You don't have to remove them. And then use a screwdriver to loosen the cover and tap it off the back. The next step is to separate the power end, which includes the motor, from the wet end of the pump. To do this, you loosen and remove the 6 bolts that hold the 2 parts together. Using the socket wrench, you can loosen these bolts and take them all out. Once you've loosened all the bolts and removed them, you can then slide the power end away from the wet end and work on it. On this particular pump, there is a diffuser which just pulls off. It's not held on with screws, so that you can access the impeller. And on the Hayward pumps, there's a wear ring which you can also remove. Using a 12mm wrench, you can secure the shaft so it won't turn, and then you can remove the impeller, turning it counterclockwise to release it from the shaft. When you do that, it reveals the seal plate, which just slides off the shaft. Attached to the motor is a mounting plate attached with 4 bolts. Remove those 4 bolts and you can remove the mounting plate from the motor. This you only need to do in the event of a new motor installation. But when you remove the bolts, the mounting plate will come loose from the motor, which is a threaded shaft C-frame motor. Remove the old shaft seal from the pump. Look first at the seal plate. In the seal plate is a white ceramic portion that you remove by turning the seal plate upside down. Use a screwdriver to tap it out. The seal has a rubber gasket which needs to come out also. The other half of the seal is on the back of the impeller over the shaft, and you can remove the spring-loaded part of the seal by twisting it and pulling it off. When you're ready to replace the seal, start first with the seal plate. The white ceramic part with the rubber gasket goes into the hole in the seal plate. Lubricate it if you need to, only around the edges of the gasket. Do not get lubricant on the white ceramic part. Place it in the depression that's made for it and press evenly until it seats all the way down into the hole. The other part of the seal goes on the back of the impeller. This is the spring-loaded part. Hold the impeller firmly and slide the seal onto the impeller. Make sure that you can see the black hard plastic ridge, that it's not against the impeller. Place the mounting plate on the motor, at the top where the label on the motor is, and then tighten each one of the bolts as hand tight as you can get it. Once we are sure the seal is in the seal plate and attached to the back of the impeller, we will reattach the impeller to the shaft, turning it clockwise until it is hand tight. Don't forget to put the wear ring back on the impeller. It says here, this part goes toward the strainer, which is on this side. Put the narrow part toward the motor, the wide part toward the strainer. Once you have the impeller on, the wear ring on, reattach the diffuser. Notice it says top on the diffuser. Place the brackets into the notches and make sure it seats firmly, and make sure that the gasket is on the end of the bracket. When everything has been put back together, you need to reattach the electrical to the motor or attach it to a new motor. Before you do that, read the motor label carefully. This motor says volts 115, 230. That means it comes from the factory at 230 volts. If you have 230 power, you can go ahead and reattach the wiring to the places provided in the motor. If you have 115 volt, you need to make sure that the adjustment is made so that the inside of the motor is ready for 115 volt wiring. What you adjust is this black plug, and the plug has to be removed and reattached further down toward the bottom of the switch. There are instructions on the motor label. Follow those carefully before you wire anything, and make sure that the voltage of the motor matches the voltage that you're attaching to it. Once you have wired the motor, put back the cover plate on the motor and reattach the two screws that hold the cover plate until they're hand tight. Next, reinsert the power end into the wet end. Replace the 6 bolts and make sure that you get them hand tight using a hand wrench or socket set only. Before turning the pump back on, make sure that the lid is firmly seated and tight. This particular pump comes with a lid wrench supplied by the manufacturer to make it easier to tighten and unscrew the lid, but make sure it's tight. Make sure that any pipe you've replaced is firmly seated into the pump, and that any fittings have been firmly glued or screwed on so that nothing comes apart when you turn the pump on. When you turn the pump back on, make sure that nothing is leaking. Check for leaks, in particular on the bottom here where the wet end and the power end go together, around the lid, and around the places where plumbing enters the pump. Also listen for any unusual noises that may indicate that you have to take the pump apart and put it back together differently. We at pool-plaza.com carry a complete line of swimming pool and spa equipment, and parts. If you need help, you can call us at 800-394-6131, or you can email us at info@pool-plaza.com.